for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
all in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs!
And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. Tibi. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro, the Sick Podcast. Thanks for watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. We're talking Montreal Canadiens hockey. And once again, in all transparency, tonight's podcast was pre-recorded a little bit earlier in the evening because, of course, with the NHL playoffs going on, every hockey fan in the world wants to watch, especially Pierre McGuire, who we're going to get to in just a minute because, of course, he honors us with his presence tonight. He is our guest on the Sick Podcast. Special thanks to partners, Energy Transportation Group. I'll start with them. Once again, recognized as one of Canada's top fleet employers for the fourth consecutive year. The prestigious accolade underscores their steadfast dedication to fostering a workplace of excellence and opportunity, much in part to their exceptional team for their unwavering commitment and contribution. Energy Transportation Group is a top fleet employer. Also, special thanks to Tibi, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Tibi, embrace your true nature. Also, special thanks to Playground. Special thanks to Souvlaki Authentique. Speaking of which, I will be there this Thursday at 1 p.m. We will record a show with Eric Engels of Sportsnet and sportsnet.ca at 1 p.m. Souvlaki Authentique, of course, at 1050 Rue Notre Dame in Lachine. Family operated Greek restaurants with 7 locations. They use fresh Quebec chicken and fresh Quebec pork, both hand cut, marinated in-house. Their gyro is hand stacked in-house, never frozen, no MSG in any of the recipes. Greek potatoes, not your Yaya's Greek potatoes, unique lemon sauce, that is, thanks to our friends Terry and Costa. So I will be there. Eric Engels will be there. We'll record our podcast there, and then you'll be able to watch it later on that night at 10 p.m. Without further ado, let's bring in Pierre McGuire. Pierre, how are you?
Excellent, Tony. Nice to visit with you.
Nice to visit with you as well. We have been watching. We have been paying attention, of course, to the Sick Podcast, the eye test, and it was just a couple of days ago with Jimmy Murphy. You said something, and I said, I got to get Pierre on to talk about that. What did Pierre say? Well, they were talking about Montreal Canadiens coaches, and I believe there's a question that came in from someone, from a viewer, someone who was watching. Jimmy threw it out to Pierre, and it was, is there anyone you would add to the Montreal Canadiens coaching staff? Without further ado, this is what Pierre had to say.
Question. Who would be the assistant coach for St. Louis in Montreal? Well, they have them.
They have guys now, but I would say I would throw one more name in there. I think Gerard Gallant would be really good.
Yeah. Yep.
I have one other name.
Okay.
I just don't know if he'd want to do it. It would right a lot of wrongs. Larry Robinson.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wouldn't that be something, huh?
Always interesting when you hear Larry's name thrown out there. You can just call Donnie Cape and he'll go on for about 3 months nonstop. But we won't do that tonight. Special hello to Donnie, by the way, if he's watching, who obviously is very, very close to Larry. And we say hi to Larry as well if he's watching. We'll get to Larry in just a second, Pierre. But, you know, Jimmy said the Canadiens have their coaches, and they do. We all know that, you know, the Canadiens have Alex Burrows, who's an assistant coach, Trevor Letowski, who's an assistant coach, Stéphane Robida, who's an assistant coach, Eric Raymond, who is the goalie coach. And, of course, they have a couple of video coaches as part of their staff as well. Now, Eric Raymond is, once again, the goalie coach. Stéphane Robida runs the defense. Alex Burrows runs the power play. Trevor Letowski runs the penalty kill. And the list goes on and on. But, Pierre, it's interesting the name you threw out there, because the one thing this staff does not have is a former NHL head coach backing up Marty St. Louis, someone that would have the experience that a Gerard Gallant has. But it's a rebuilding team where a lot of guys are getting an opportunity to prove themselves, and it almost seems like they did the same thing with the coaches. So talk to me about adding an experienced member to the coaching staff, and how you can sell that to Marty St. Louis, and whether or not now is the right time for something like that, or do you add in a coach when this team is ready to make take the next step? Maybe they are already. Talk to me. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, no, I think that you can never have enough brain power within an organization. And with Gerard in particular, he's been a head coach in a few different places. Some have worked out really well, taking Vegas to the Stanley Cup final in his first year. And the team's first year was pretty impressive. It wasn't his fault in Florida when it didn't work. It wasn't his fault in Columbus when it didn't work. I know he coached a team that won the Memorial Cup, which is not an easy thing to do. So I've been a big fan of Gerard's for a long time. I think it's important for mentors to be part of any organization. With the salary cap in place, Tony, the only thing that's not capped are the salaries of coaches, scouts, trainers, management people. So if those things aren't capped and you really want to run a first-class organization, you should never be afraid of trying to hire intelligent people that have experience. And I think that both Gerard Gallant and obviously Larry would be amazing. That's why I threw his name out there, would be really beneficial. I saw what Larry did with the St. Louis Blues, Tony. I was there every single day. I did every game St. Louis played from the start of the playoffs to the end of the playoffs in 2019 when they won the Stanley Cup. And Larry Robinson was a big part of it. Nobody talked about it. I just watched him interact with the players. I watched him interact with the coaching staff. He was a major part of it.
Pierre, let's just say the Canadiens would bring in a couple of coaches without parting ways with the ones that are there already. You just said you don't have a salary cap on coaches. You don't have a salary cap on scouts. You don't have a salary cap on personnel, unless, of course, there's an internal budget within the club. Are there teams out there in the National Hockey League that employ more coaches, more scouts than other teams? Because once again, 3 minds are better than 2, 5 are better than 4, 6 are better than 5, and so on.
Toronto Maple Leafs, go check out the size of their staff. New York Rangers, go check out the size of their staff. I can go around the league.
Yeah.
There are a lot of big staffs around the league, a lot. And most of the fans don't care and they don't know. They don't need to know. Most of those people are either on the analytics side or on the scouting side. Those groups have really expanded over time. When I first started in the league, most teams would have 7 to 12 full-time scouts. They might have, at the amateur level, they might have 2 or 3 professional scouts, and that was it. And so what coaches used to do in those days, and I was one of them, we'd go on the road and we'd always go a couple days early when we were going out west in particular, and we'd go watch junior games, especially if we were in cities that were close by. You'd be in Calgary, you'd be in Edmonton, you'd be in Vancouver. You could sneak into games. When you go to Toronto, you go sneak in a game. When you go to Montreal, you try to sneak in a major junior game. When you go to Boston, you go see Division I college games. So that's what would happen. Then the scouting staff started to get bigger and much more professional, I might add. And it turned out well. But Tony, the one thing I'd say is you don't have a cap on brain power in the NHL. You have a cap on athletic power, but you don't have a cap on brain power. And I don't think enough teams are paying attention to that.
Pierre, this topic of conversation, I have to tell you, it really fascinates me. Reason being is not only in hockey, but a lot of other sports, a lot of assistant coaches are actually the masterminds behind what's going on in terms of tactics and preparation and all that stuff. The guys that end up being the head coaches, or even women for women's hockey, that is, they're not necessarily the most tactical, but more often than not, they're the ones who probably lead the best, who manage people the best. And so I've thought about this for a while, and I go back, I think about the Canadiens when Alain Vigneault was coaching the Canadiens and Dave King was his assistant. At the time, Dave King had a lot more experience than Alain Vigneault. And of course, there's that whole thing, with all due respect, Alain, that the Montreal Canadiens absolutely needed to have a French-speaking coach at the time, and they still do. But a lot of people thought that Dave King, rightfully so, was the mastermind. He was the tactical guy. We brought in, of course, the left-wing lock and all that stuff. And so, but I wonder, though, in terms of, I mean, it's easy for you to say you should always surround yourself with as many people, but you know as well as I do that in professional sports, in every organization, there's going to be one or two insecure people, right? You probably lived it, probably even as probably lived it in the last couple of years. But you know, when somebody comes in who knows a lot, it makes some people uncomfortable. Is that fair to say? Now, I don't think that it would make Marty St. Louis uncomfortable, but I'm wondering, what if Marty is trying to preach the game the way he sees it, and the Canadiens go out and they get an assistant coach who doesn't see the game the way Marty? As much as it could be a compliment, could it actually stop the progress of what's going on, because there ends up being a little bit of, you know, not an understanding of which way you want to go? I'm not so sure you get my question.
I know I do.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of merit to your question. I think there's a lot of strength to that question, and a lot of reality to the question. So that would be something that would be dealt with in a job interview. And it wouldn't be everybody. I think it'd be the GM of the team, obviously, probably the president of hockey operations, and Jeff Gorton. And so Kent Hughes, Jeff Gorton, and Marty. You sit down with the candidate and you say, okay, how do you see the neutral zone? How do you see the power play? How do you see the penalty kill? You know, where do you fit on our staff? How much voice do you want to have? And these are things that get sorted out in the interview process. And if somebody says, you know, I have to have, and when they say this, you got to be careful, I have to have total control of the power play. Well, that's an X for me. That doesn't count, because most of the teams, and I'll use the Rangers because they've had some success since Laviolette went there, most of the teams have collaborative coaching. So in New York, Phil Housley basically coaches the defense. Doesn't mean he's got final say of who's going on the ice, but he's responsible for looking after the defense. Dan Muse is in charge of communicating with the video replay people, doing strategy, in-game strategy on the bench, and working the video monitors. Peter Laviolette, he runs the forwards. Michael Pekka, he does faceoffs. He works with the forwards, and he's got a lot to say about the power play and the penalty kill. So he works on the special teams. But it all comes down to what you correctly said before, Tony. The head coach manages all the assets. He manages the coaching assets, and he manages the training assets, and he manages the playing assets. Nobody does it better right now in the NHL. There's not a better asset manager in the league, I'm telling you, than John Cooper in Tampa. He's not. There's no better asset manager. Now, is John the best tactician in the league? He is not. Does John run the best practices in the league? He does not. But he has assets around him that are really good. He brought in a head coach from Detroit, Jeff Blashill. Jeff Blashill's really good. I don't think Jeff Blashill's an elite head coach, but he's a really good coach. He's a really good coach. You know, and you can look at all the different things that he has around him. Jeff Halpern is a great offensive tactician. He's a great face-off tactician. He's been there for a long time. So there's one example of what I'm talking about. I've just showed you the New York Rangers example. I think if you looked at Florida, Sylvain Lefebvre runs a defense, does a great job. You look at up front, you got Paul Maurice, who's got more experience than I would say almost any coach that's still coaching outside of Laviolette. He's got a whack of experience. It's amazing to see. You know, Paul's been coaching the league, I think, 25 straight years. That's a lot of experience. Tuomo Ruutu, it works on their bench because he just finished playing and he can communicate with the players fantastically well. You know, so you look at all the different guys that Paul has down there, and then he's got Jamie Compon working with his forwards. It works.
Pierre,
it can work in Montreal.
I think there's no better time to actually bring in an assistant coach for Marty St. Louis than now. Let me explain why. If Marty St. Louis has a year or a year and a half left on his contract, or let's not just say it's Marty St. Louis, it's any other coach, and an organization brings in an assistant coach, that head coach might probably get the feeling that that coach they bring in is probably breathing down his neck, is probably there as the backup plan just in case something goes wrong. But when Marty's contract is up and you're saying Marty has extended his contract and he'll be the Canadiens coach for the next X amount of years, he knows that he's comfortable and he's going to be here for a while. Wouldn't that be the best opportunity for a management team to say, hey, Marty, we'd like to help you out a little bit. What do you think?
I think he'd listen. The one thing I've noticed about the Canadiens, especially knowing Jeff Gordon and Kent and Marty, I don't know Marty as well, believe it or not. I know the other guys better. They've worked really well together, Tony. I don't think they have any communication issues at all. That's an upper management team, which I think is really important when you're going through a rebuild. And rebuilds are really fun and they're really sexy when you first start them. The problem is owners get frustrated that the product's not being built fast enough. And when they get frustrated, I don't think Jeff Molson's there yet, but when they get frustrated, that destroys the rebuild and then it gets up. I've lived that. I've lived that one in Hartford, so I know how that works, and that's not fun. It's really hard. So that's part of the rebuild thing. But I think you've got an owner that's really bought in, and it doesn't surprise me because he understands the process a little bit.
Yeah. How about if they had that conversation with Marty, and Marty says, I think it would be a slight. Let's just. I don't know if Marty would. Let's just say Marty says, I have the confidence in the people that I have here. And bringing in someone would probably, they would probably take it badly. I don't know. Is that possible that you hear something like that, or that he wouldn't want to bring in any? I understand the whole concept of the more minds are better, and of course Jared Gallant's got a CV that speaks for itself. But can it be that it could be accepted badly? Like maybe Trevor Letowski probably thinks that I'm the next man up. And then Jared Gallant comes along. How does that affect the chemistry of? We know that sometimes you bring in the wrong player, it can negatively affect the chemistry of a locker room and a team. Can that happen with a coaching staff?
It can, especially if it's not a strong staff, and if they're mixed messages from management or ownership to the head coach, then it's a problem. You can't worry about the psyche of your assistants. You really can't. I was an assistant, so I can speak to it. Assistants have a lot of responsibility, but in the pecking order of the organization, they're not near the top. There's some assistants that have more power than others. I'll give you an example. Rick Bowness, when he was in Tampa, had a lot to say. He did, and it worked. Now, they didn't win the cup, but I know they got to the final. So, I mean, there's some guys that have a little bit more say than others. I look at Vancouver. I think Adam Foote's got a lot to say to Rick Tocchet. He's got more to say to Rick Tocchet than Mike Yeo has to say to Rick Tocchet. But that's how they set it up. So every team's different. I will tell you,
Kirk Muller, when he was under Claude Julien?
Kirk had a lot. I can tell you right now, with Spencer Carberry in Washington, Kirk Muller's got a lot to say. And he should. He helped that kid a lot. Spencer Carberry's a young coach, had never really been in the NHL except being an assistant in Toronto. And they didn't have very much success. You can talk about, they had this regular season or that regular season. They didn't win in the playoffs. So it's fine. Spencer Carberry won in the American League. He won in the East Coast League. He's a good coach. But Kirk Muller has a lot to say there. Let me give you this one, Tony.
Yeah.
In 1990, when Bob Johnson and Craig Patrick went to Pittsburgh, they knew they needed some help because they hadn't been around the league in a while. Craig was an athletic director at Denver University, and Bob was running USA Hockey. They knew they needed help. So they called Scotty Bowman, who was doing Hockey Night in Canada.
Wow.
And then they said to Scotty, can you help us put together a staff? Right after the press conference, I got a call from Scotty. And I went and joined them. And then Barry Smith went. And then we started building it up. And that's how it works. So Pittsburgh, they weren't afraid to hire the best people, and it worked out really well.
All right, but the name Gallant, I'm very intrigued by it because we all know he's a good coach. That there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, if you watch a lot of Montreal Canadiens games, there's a lot of people say, you know what, they have a hard time holding on to leads. They have a hard time with defensive hockey. They're a little bit confused. At times they're playing man-to-man. At times they're playing zone. They probably need a defensive special. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. but Gallant is not that defensive tactician that's probably lacking on this. So why Gallant then? Because wouldn't you want to once again complement St. Louis with strengths that he doesn't have? Or you're trying to?
Here's what I'm going to tell you. What were the stats of the Montreal Canadiens in the power play this year? Not very good.
No, it was in the bottom third of the league.
It was. So one thing I know Gerard can help you with, and that's not to take anything away from Alex Burrows, but they're going to have Wayne Hudson there next year that's going to help that power play a lot. It's going to make Cole Caulfield a much better power play player. They're going to have Kirby Dach. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the power play. So I'm not saying he takes over the power play, but a guy like Gerard can help your power play.
Perfect. I love where you're going with this, but why doesn't Marty take control of the power play? I mean,
it's hard to do, as a head coach.
Really?
I'll give you an example. When Buffalo had
juggling too many balls,
the media demands in Montreal of all the markets is really hard. One, because you got to do it in French, and then you got to do it in English, and it's hard. You talked about managing people. You're constantly managing. You're like a doctor. You're on call 24/7 in Montreal. It's hard to do. And I'm just telling you, if you're running a power play, the tape demands, just the prep demands, it's pretty significant. So you might not have enough time. I'll give you an example. Back when I was coaching, John Muckler was an elite coach. He was a very good coach. And when he ran the Buffalo Sabres, he had an assistant by the name of John Tortorella. And John Muckler ran the power play in Edmonton for years and years and years, and they were always the best. Now, did they have the best players? Yeah, but they always had the best power play.
Yeah.
When he went to Buffalo, you know who ran the power play? John Tortorella. And John Tortorella was phenomenal. I coached against him. Trust me. And that power play had Dale Hawerchuk on it, the late Dale Hawerchuk. It had Doug Bodger on it. I mean, you got Yuri Himalev on it. You get Alexander McGillney. It was a murderer's row power play, Tony. And Tortorella ran it. And the way he ran, I watched their practices all the time. We played them 9 times in 1 year, Tony. We played Buffalo 9 times in 1 year. And I'd watch them practice. And it was the most unique practice of any power play at that time in the NHL. And it was great. John Muckler, who ran the greatest power play in Edmonton, had nothing to do with it. It was John Tortorella.
So I looked it up. Only 5 teams had a power play with a lower percentage than the Canadiens this year. For whatever reason, the Canadiens' power play in the last 10 years or so has always, or more often than not, been in the bottom third of the league. I might have something here. Would it make sense if you would hire a Gallant to actually send an Alex Burrows to Laval to take over the vacant spot left by Kelly Buchberger, who left about a week ago to GM and coach his own team in Alberta?
It could. I don't see that being a step down, actually. I don't see that being a step down at all, especially with the way the Canadiens are developing prospects. That would depend on them. That's a Marty St. Louis call. That's a Kent Hughes call. We're playing all, a game right now where I'm not comfortable because I don't like to see coaches move.
I hear you.
Unless they ask to move. Like Buchberger is going out to Alberta. That's great. I'm happy for Kelly. Kelly's a good man. He did some good work there. I watched their team play a lot when Kelly first started there with LaPerriere and with Houle. And that staff worked hard together. They did. They worked really, really hard together to get that team a couple of years ago into the playoffs because at the start of the year, they were not looking good. And they found a way to get it done.
Yeah, Pierre, the reason why I asked the question is not to have anyone demoted, but actually there's some coaches who have taken the decision to actually go to the American Hockey League over the years in the last decade or so to actually gain that experience, end up becoming a coach there, thinking that it might serve them better to be a head coach in the National Hockey League one day than actually being an assistant in the NHL and probably trying to get there. Like, I don't know what Alex Burrows' aspirations are, maybe whether or not he wants to be a head coach, but if he does, I mean, didn't Pascal Vincent coach in the American Hockey League for a long time when he could have been an assistant in the National Hockey League? And today he's a head coach in the National Hockey League?
Yeah. So I'll give you one of the best examples. You're raising a really good issue. When Alain Vigneault got fired by the Montreal Canadiens, he went and coached in Beauport.
Correct.
In the Quebec Major Junior League.
Yep.
And after that, everybody takes it for granted that he went right to Vancouver from there. He did not. He went to the Manitoba Moose, which was Vancouver's farm team at the time. And he coached in Manitoba in the American Hockey League. Then he went to Vancouver. Took a while for him to bounce back. So my point is that the American Hockey League is a fantastic. I can tell you tomorrow, I don't know if you have this breaking news, but tomorrow the Seattle Kraken are going to make an announcement. The coach of their farm team, Dan Bilesma, is going to be named coach of Seattle. He is. I'm telling you right now, it's a done deal. So he's going to go to Seattle and be the coach. Now, Danny's won a cup in Pittsburgh, went to Buffalo, didn't work out. You know, he's moved around now. He's been in the American League for a little while, and it's working really well for him in Coachella Valley. It really is. But he had to go back and reset. It happens. It happens. Very competitive.
So talking about Bilesma, who was coaching the farm team in the AHL and then now is going to end up coaching the big team, there's been a lot of talk about JF Houle. Mm-hmm. You know, the Canadian season ended. It'll be 6 weeks tomorrow. JF Houle's team, unfortunately, did not make the playoffs in the American Hockey League. They lost a game in the final weekend of the season that put them out.
Yeah, to Belleville.
Correct. So let me ask you this. When a season is over more than a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and there's still no news on the assistant coaches with the big team, the head coach with the farm team, does that mean it's a formality and it's going to happen? Or does that mean, like, what's your read into this situation with JF Houle?
Well, I think they're probably really happy with where their organization is with all the personnel that they have. I don't see the Canadiens having a problem with any situation right now. I think their rebuild's on track. I've talked to you about this numerous times.
Yes.
Maybe I'm more positive than most people, but I see the underlying players coming up, and it's really good. It's exciting. It's really exciting. But I don't. If they haven't made a move by now, I'd be surprised if they were going to make a significant move.
Okay, but you know, anyone who's anyone in hockey will tell you that the number one mandate from the coach of the American Hockey League team is to develop as many NHL players as possible, yes, and to probably emulate the same system so that when the players are called up, it's probably an easy transition and they kind of slide into the lineup. I don't know if that's fair or not. You tell me.
Oh, that's fair. That's
coached. I never did.
No, that's very fair. That's very fair.
Okay. Having said that, and that making the playoffs is secondary, we also know that making the playoffs is pretty important for an organization because they'd love to see their young players actually get a taste of playoff hockey at the American Hockey League level so they could be part of their, you know, part of their experiences as a player. Is it possible that you could be very happy with the way a coach develops players, but not making the playoffs on the final weekend of the season when on paper you have the players to probably make it, leaves a sour taste in some people's mouths?
It could, especially when you have an American League team that sells a lot of tickets. And they sell a lot. They do very well in Laval.
Yeah.
And that's a tribute to the organization, the entire organization. When you have an American Hockey League thriving the way Laval is, that says a lot about your infrastructure, which is really positive. Tony, I had a chance to coach in the old International League, the Muskegon team, which was Pittsburgh's farm team. I was there for 3 days as the head coach, and then Bob Johnson got sick, and I got called back to Pittsburgh. But I was told when I went there by Craig Patrick, I'm not worried about you winning or losing. I want you to develop 2 to 3 players a year. That's a lot, but I want you to do that. He says, I know you can do it. I said, I know I can too. So I eventually left that team to go back to Pittsburgh because Bob got sick and Scotty wanted me with him. So I went back. And then I had another opportunity to coach in the minors with Calgary's team in Salt Lake, and then eventually down in the Maritimes. And that was basically the same thing. We want you to develop players. Develop players is the most important thing we have here. There wasn't so much the concern about winning or losing. So, again, I think it's really important for your team to develop players at that level. Now, if they can develop in a winning environment, it's fantastic. That's great. That's really good.
Marinaro, a shout out to Playground. Step into the excitement at Playground with the Mystery High Hand promotion. Every day starting at 10 a.m., you have a chance to win a share of over $120,000 in cash prizes available until May 31st, whether you play from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily or join the late night game action from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. from Sunday to Thursday. You could win up to $25,000. For more details, visit playground.ca. Don't miss out. Swing by Playground and get in on the winning. Okay. JF Houle, I want to get back to him. It's not because you're the coach of the American Hockey League team that one day you're going to be promoted to be the coach of the National Hockey League team, like we're seeing here with Bilesma. But a lot of organizations have that philosophy, and that's okay. And some don't. Marty St. Louis was not the assistant coach of the Rocket when he got the job. Having said that, in your ideal world, would you like to have in place with Laval a head coach that one day is labeled as the next one? Because let's think about this for a second. If the players are in Laval to develop to one day make it to the National Hockey League, shouldn't logic dictate that you should probably do the same thing with your coaches?
I think that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Here's the one thing I would say, rather than do your plan, which I think makes sense, good sense, I would say my way would be you have to have a succession plan. So when there could be a list of 5 guys. Who do you think the 5 best coaches are that aren't employed in the NHL right now? Does that include your head coach in the American League? And if it does, he's at the top of the list because he's the one you're most familiar with. So that's how I've always done that. I go into these interviews and I get asked, who's the best trainer, in your opinion? Who's the best, assistant coaching group? Who's the best scouting staff? So when I've gone into different GM interviews, I've presented, and this is one of the frustrating parts about the job or the job interview process. You present this plan that you've created, and then you don't get the job, and they take good portions of your plan and implement them, and I've watched it over the years. It's frustrating. But I think the one thing is it's really important that you have a plan. If your A plan doesn't work, you have a solid B and a C plan. And if you don't, then you haven't done your job as a management person.
So I'll put you on the spot here. If you could give me one name of one scout that you would send out to an arena to watch the game and tell that scout, you got to come back to me and tell me if there's a player who's going to have an NHL career, and if so, which one will have the best one? One scout out of all of them that you know. Can you give me a name?
Yep. I could give you 5, but I'll give you one.
Al Murray.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So Al's taken a little bit of a step back in Tampa, but I've done so much with Al over the years, talking hockey, traveling with him, watching him not only when he was in LA, but when he was in Tampa, watching him run Hockey Canada, all those World Juniors. He and Blair McAsee. Blair was first, then Al came in after him. They did unbelievable work. Everybody thinks it's so easy to put together a World Junior roster for Canada. Well, you see when they don't win, they didn't win this year, it's not as easy as everybody thinks. It's hard to do. And there were no Russians there this year. So everybody thinks it's a real easy thing to do. It's not. It's hard. So all those guys that had that World Junior experience, and McAsee, I will tell you this, I spent so much time talking to him over the years. He's a phenomenal scout. Blair is really, really good. But Al Murray, if you were to say, Pierre, you got to bet $100 on it, I'd bet on Al Murray.
I know which scout you would choose if I told that scout to go to Sweden to scout somebody.
You would. Håkan Andersson.
There we go.
I'd pick Håkan Andersson.
Detroit Red Wings.
What Håkan did with Detroit is unbelievable, Tony. It's truly amazing. And he didn't just do Sweden. He was doing Finland. He was doing, like all these different countries. He was doing Czechia back in the day. He was in Slovakia. He was doing Russia. Pavel Datsuk's his guy. That's his guy. Pavel Datsuk was a 6th-round pick. You start looking at some of the players that Hawk took, Johan Franz, and, you can look at all of them. It's amazing.
Zetterberg?
Yeah, Zetterberg. Nicky
Holmstrom?
Yeah, all these guys. It's pretty amazing.
Pierre, crazy question, but you would know. And by the way, for those who don't recognize the name Al Murray with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Hakan Anderson with the Detroit Red Wings, I would think that if you want to try and get scouts on your staff, you kind of got to wait for their contract to be up with their respective teams. And more often than not, it's not, because teams end up, extending and keeping under contract their best employees. And I guess it's probably considered tampering, but if once again the same logic prepares that there's no salary cap on having the best scouts in the world, can you not have someone whisper in their ear, hey, Montreal is willing to give you a blank check and you can sign the amount type of thing? Can you do that?
I wouldn't do that. So here's how I would do it. I'd change the job title. There are very few teams that are going to hold somebody back from an increased job title.
That's good.
So I would never want to get caught tampering in the league. It's a bad mark on your name if you get caught tampering. It's a real bad mark. So I would never want to do that. And I learned that again a long time ago from Scotty. And so I think it's better to change a job title for somebody if you really want somebody.
Assistant GM. That's brilliant, Pierre.
Well, let's just say Al's title is Chief Scout. Let's just say it's Chief Scout.
Yeah.
I would say you're now the Director of Player Personnel and Co-Assistant GM. That's
brilliant.
That's a huge job title change. And that way you're not tampering and you're making the guy feel really important that he's part of the process. That's where Craig Patrick was so smart. He was so smart. I love going back to Mario's fantasy camp because Craig's there all the time, and usually we're part of the same team. I'm the coach, and he's usually the GM, and we have a lot of fun putting our rosters together. But Craig was never – you brought it up before so well, Tony. He was never afraid to hire people that were really intelligent. He's never afraid of that. He wanted the very best people around him. I think he learned that from Herb Brooks. I really do. I think he learned that from Herb.
Yeah.
And they had a really special relationship. I'll give you this one quick Craig Patrick story.
Miracle on Ice. Yeah.
So I'm sitting in my office in Pittsburgh, and I'm like, back in those days, it wasn't with computers. You're making tapes with 2 VCRs, reel to reel, and it was hard work. I'm not kidding you. Your arms are up. You're always turning and adjusting. You wanted to make the tape seamless. And Michelle Coliani was the name of Craig's personal assistant. So Michelle knocked on the door and she says, "Hey, Pierre, how you doing?" I said, "Good, Michelle, how you doing?" She goes, "Craig's still here. He'd love to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay." And I was like, "Oh, man, tell me I'm not getting fired." That's a weird deal. So I walked down the hall and I went in the office and he said, "Shut the door." And I'm like, "Oh, darn." And he goes, "How do you think the season's going?" I go, "It's going fantastic. It's going really well." He goes, "I agree. It's going really well." He says, "I'm going to tell you something that Herb Brooks once got really mad at a couple guys. And I had told Herb that the guys weren't doing very well away from the rink. And he said, I learned that I didn't have to tell Herb everything that I knew or saw." And he said, "I know you're running the practices and some guys aren't practicing hard enough and you're probably telling Scotty." And he says, Scotty doesn't have to know everything. Let's keep the harmony in the room. And it was some of the best advice you could ever get. And Craig was so good at that. And again, it gets passed on. And, we talk about those older coaches maybe coming in to help. That's an example of that, where the veteran mentorship does matter. It matters a lot.
You talk about a lot of people being smart so far in this podcast, and you brought up Scotty, and you brought up Al Murray, and you brought up Craig Patrick. Pierre McGuire is a pretty smart guy too, because he's picking up so many things he's learned along the way from all of these people. And you've added that to your wealth of knowledge, which I think is pretty cool, Pierre. I have to get back to that comment where you brought up Larry Robinson and you said, well, they would be able to right a wrong, which obviously we know that under, Marc Bergevin's regime, that he was supposed to interview Larry Robinson, but I believe there was a flood at Larry's home in Sarasota, Florida, or on the ranch or something like that. And they had to put it off. And in the meantime, they went out and they hired J.J. Daigneault to be the defense coach. I know it left a lot of sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And with all due respect to J.J. Daigneault, to pass up on an opportunity to interview Larry Robinson, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. I've never been a GM, but I don't even think you'd have to interview Larry Robinson. I just think you'd give him the job. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But You kind of surprised me with the name because I kind of get the feeling that Larry's pretty well on his ranch, and he probably spent some time with his horses, and probably wouldn't want to be on a flight and working every day. But at the same time, I think when he was with that St. Louis team, was he not going out to St. Louis or San Jose and like once a month and probably spending about 5 days there out of the month? And is that something that you would see when you talk about Larry and the Canadiens?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if this is exactly what transpired, but you remember when I talked about being frustrated, you give your plan to different people. One of the first things I brought up in my final interview with Kevin Gilmore, Serge Savard, Michael Landauer, and Jeff Molson was my desire to have Larry Robinson come back into the fold of the franchise and how important I deemed it to be. Having coached against Larry and obviously grown up watching him play, and actually coached when he was a player in LA, just the respect I had for Larry is immense. And I thought it was really important at that juncture of the franchise's history to have somebody that could come in that actually had tentacles to the glory days of the team. And so that he could educate the younger players that were there at the time, how important it was to be a Montreal Canadien, how you could be an elite Montreal Canadien, but here were the things you had to do. I thought that was really important. And that's why I brought it up.
Could you imagine how much a Caden Gooley, a Jaden Struble, an Arbor Jackeye, just to name a few, can learn from Larry Robinson? 3 very different players with 3 very different skill sets, but yet you get the feeling that Larry can make them the best versions of themselves.
I would just say this, one more. I would have liked to have seen how PK Subban would have evolved as a player had Larry been there, because that's when it would have been. I would have just liked to have seen that.
Probably still be playing in the league today.
I can't speak to that, but I would say he would have had the career that I thought he was probably headed towards when the 09 World Junior was amazing. I'll just tell you. And he was a big part of that team. Tavares was a big part of it. Ryan Ellis was a big part of it. Evander Kane was a big part of it. Subban was a huge part of that. Tyler Myers and Subban never got enough acclaim. And I was there, and I'm just telling you. And so I always thought PK, he was one of the guys I was thinking about when, I was talking to Jeff and to Serge Savard and to Kevin Gilmore and to Michael Landauer.
Remember how good PK was when he came up in 2010, played a couple of regular season games, and then played for the Canadiens in the playoffs. And I know you remember this because you were working that series versus the Washington Capitals in round 1 in 2010 when Moore scored the game-winning goal. And I think you said, unbelievable, huh?
Yes,
and then they beat the Pittsburgh.
You know what's amazing about that one? Yarrow Spacek and his shot blocking, Roman Hammerlick and how fearless he was. Dom Moore played so well. Dom was fantastic. And obviously, there were a lot of guys that really cared about being Montreal Canadiens on that team. And what they did, Yarrow was a big story too. I think
of course,
Yarrow was a huge story.
Game 6 versus the Capitals.
That was
amazing.
Amazing game. So, and Camilleri was special.
Yeah.
People forget Camilleri was on that team. Camilleri was an important part of that team.
13 goals, I think, in the playoffs, something like that.
Yeah, he had a big year, a big playoff year. But PK, I thought, had a chance to be really, really special. And wasn't just him either. There were other guys that were there, but I just thought that Larry would have been a really good addition at the time.
Pierre, amazing conversation as always. Once you said what you said with Jimmy Murphy on the Sick Podcast, the eye test, and I said, I got to get Pierre on. And of course you accepted as you always do. So much appreciated, Pierre. Thanks for joining me and have a good one.
I love being on with you, Tony.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
The feeling is mutual. There you have it. The great Pierre McGuire, Marinaro. All right. Okay. We have a winner to announce. We have a winner of our beautiful frame that we have, which I have right here, of course, which is Samuel Montembeau's first game in Montreal. I still have it bubble wrapped because obviously I'm taking special care of it, okay? But I think we can show the picture. Let's show the picture because this is bubble wrapped, okay? Do we have the picture that we can bring up? I think we probably do. But if we can get that, all right, okay. So we threw all the names. We had a contest, okay? And this is just one of 5 in the world, folks. One of 5 in the world. We had a contest, and we asked you all to subscribe, to comment, to add others, to tag Era Frames and Unrivaled Memorabilia. Well, actually, this is courtesy from them. And we put all the names in a randomizer. And in the end, we have the winner. And the winner is Stefan, whose handle is at, Twitter handle that is at Bionic Stefan. At Bionic Stefan is our winner. Stefan, we will contact you by Twitter and send you a direct message. So congratulations to you. And thank you to Era Frames and Unrivaled for a beautiful, beautiful frame of Samuel Montembeault. Special thanks to Energy Transportation Group once again. Special thanks to Playground. Special thanks to Bittt Tibi. And special thanks to Souvlaki Authentique. Terry and Costa and staff, we will see you on Thursday afternoon at 1 p.m. with Eric Engels joining me. There we go. We will be at 1050 Rue Notre Dame in Lachine, and hopefully it's a nice day, so I'll make my way down with the Vespa if it is. Either way, rain or shine, I will be there. Eric will be there. We're going to be podcasting from Souvlaki Authentique, and then we'll upload it for you later on that night, and you'll be able to watch it at 10 p.m. For Agnello and Sammy and Master Control, I want to thank you all for watching. If you like the show, like it, share with your friends, comment sick, leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Agnello and Sammy and Master Control, they're Cavallaro. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.